Aloha and welcome back to another episode of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. Today we are previewing the Packers Thursday night football face-off for week 2 against the Washington Commanders. They don't watch out, I'm going to call them the Sentinels like in the replacements, but
I've been liking people calling them the commies. I think that works out pretty good.
I would have stuck with that if Dan Snyder was still their owner, but honestly, one of the worst people on this planet. But yeah, the season has started off really well for the Packers. Obviously, the biggest question for them going into this game is some injury concerns. Um, Off the bat, great radio. Of course, I don't have that pulled up. Genius. So let's see. So the big news today being that starting offensive linemen Zach Tom and Aaron Banks did not practice today. Obviously, Tom was injured on the interception, the pick six that didn't happen, and Aaron Banks was injured on the Jacobs touchdown, and it's not one for the faint of heart if you go and watch the highlights. He gets rolled up on from behind pretty good on that play. Banks did comment after the game that his removal was a precautionary move. Seeing the way his ankle torqued on that play, I think it's a little further than precautionary. I don't believe this is one of those, they're being overly safe kind of thing. But, we'll see. LaFleur did say that they'll play it out. They'll give them till game time decision to see if they can go. But, yeah, and he did say that they don't expect these two injuries to be long term. And as much as winning this game would be really important for the Packers, you don't want to turn these injuries into long-term injuries. Like that would be, obviously to go up 2-0 in the conference record, beat two teams that made the playoffs last season, the Commanders being a team that made the conference championships last year. There's a lot on the table, but at the same time, it's week 2. You have the mini bye coming up. The bye is in 2.5 weeks at this point, and you just don't want to do anything that'll put you behind the 8 ball. So in that similar vein, Nate Hobbs was a limited participant. I'd be really interested to see if he goes this week after, I felt like he was trending towards playing against Detroit. Who knows? Maybe it was he's going to play one of these games, and we don't want to him playing 2 games in 5 days, which is understandable for a guy who's coming off of a knee scope. That might be a little bit too ambitious. And so, they're going to play it, precautionary in a sense in that regard. Otherwise, Matthew Golden, after popping up as a limited participant for Monday's simulated practice, he was returned to a full participant today. Quay Walker was a DNP yesterday, but he was up to a limited participant today. I quoted that to being like LaFleur is walking around the building and a trainer comes up to him and says, "Oh, Quay was in the trainer's room today and was in the tub," and LaFleur's like, "He didn't participate in our imaginary practice."
I know he said that. I know Golden was one of them. I can't remember who the other one was. That he said that had they not had the short week, they wouldn't have never popped up on the injury report anyway.
Let me try and look that up as we go. Otherwise, everyone else on the injury report is basically trending the same way. Obviously, Brendan Cox and Bo Melton being the other 2 guys that were injured in the game. So everyone who was injured and did not return to the game has been DNPs through 2 days. Jaden Reed would have been quote unquote given the day off on Monday and returned to practice on Tuesday. So that's trending in a similar way that it did last week. Everyone else, it's kind of steady as she goes. Jordan was a full participant, listed full participant with the thumb. So yeah, the biggest one is we must all bow our heads and do a prayer for the Celtic Cannon, who propped up on the injury report with a ding to his right knee. So we hope that he's fine, because we need him launching bombs again, in the event that he is called upon. So Joe, I know that the big one is the O line, but anything else that stands out to you from the injury report?
The second two secondary ones, like you were talking about with Nate Hobbs, but you also said that Bo Melton popped up there. Well, those would be two of your keystones for your secondary, your main starter, and then your key depth piece. So, it's going to be interesting to see how they play that one out. The offensive line, yeah, that one's going to be an interesting one too because you've got two of your starters down. Uh, but really, I don't think any of them are uh, killer. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how Whelan goes. I mean, it says he was a full participant, so I'm not seeing any issues there. He might have just like hyperextended it a little bit and felt discomfort, but yeah, I'm hoping that maybe with Brenton being it's kind of interesting that Brenton Cox is dealing with a groin injury. 13-year-old me is making all the jokes in my head about that shit. But I'm wondering if with him not practicing, if that opens maybe for Baron Sorrell to come back in. I know it still says he's limited, but he's got to be trending in the right direction here pretty quick. Other than that, no big surprises. I was looking at the Commanders one. Their punters having is on the list too, so this is going to be the battle of whose punter's healthier. And then Eckler is on there, and then it says Jaden Daniels is on there with a right wrist injury, but he was a full participant on Monday. I'm wondering if that'll affect him anything in the game. Maybe it was just like he jammed his wrist or something. You're muted.
Quinn seemed to blow it off pretty quickly in his presser today, so he kind of said like, it's nothing. We're just being extra precautionary. Yeah, of course. This is one of the more annoying things is that no one does a full transcript of everything LaFleur says in his presser. Like, different people have different little snippets and stuff like that. So yeah, I can't find the quote where he talks about like Golden, and you're right. It was two people he listed, but I can't for the life of me remember who the second person was that he was like, no, they would have been fine if it was the full week and stuff. So we'll just see. We'll see when it gets to Thursday. We should get full designations tomorrow. We'll see who remains on the injury report and who comes off of it. But otherwise, we'll get into the opponent, and as we said, that's the Washington Commanders, formerly Washington Football Team, formerly Washington inflammatory names. So they faced the Giants, and won a 21-6 football game. And I watched. I can't say I watched a lot of this game. I watched some of the highlights and stuff, but it almost felt like they kind of sleptwalked through it, honestly, through that game. They just kind of played it like the Giants were never going to catch up to them. The one thing I will say is that the Giants were able to get some pressure. The Giants have a similar defensive front setup to the Packers. Honestly, they're when you compare their first and second level or first and third level defenders, it's kind of similar to the Green Bay, where it's like the corners are nothing to write home about, but the front has a bunch of guys that are like, those are guys that can put heat on the quarterback. Obviously, none of them is a Micah Parsons, but you've got Kayvon Thibodeau, you've got Brian Burns, guys who have a reputation for being explosive pass rushers who can bring the heat off the edge. We saw their rookie right tackle Josh Connerly have some issues. I believe Sam Cosmi is on IR or PUP right now, so they do not have their starting O line configuration available to them. And really, that's going to be where the balance of this game is, especially on a short week. You generally don't see teams go super extravagant with their game plan. there's two routes you can go. You can kind of go for the shock and awe route, or you can just be like, especially this early in the season, we're just going to double down on what we've really drilled in so far. Almost, I don't want to say completely, but almost to the point of where Green Bay may kind of turn around and be like, we're going to approach this like we approached the Lions game to a certain extent. Just put a little more reads in for the fact that Daniels is a mobile quarterback. But otherwise, it's kind of just like, Green Bay might just go back to the well, and if we execute as well as we can, we should win this game. But if we doesn't, we're not going to expose, any sorts of the playbook that's, going to be, you know, we're on a game that's naturally expected to be sloppy because there's less preparation. It's early in the season, guys aren't in shape and all that kind of stuff. It's like they might just say like, let's just kind of, do one of these and rerun what we did against Detroit and kind of like, let's get through these 60 minutes, try to get the win, but main thing, get out as healthy as we can and get into the mini bye.
I think this game's going to be a real test for this defense one way or the other, because whether Jaden Daniels is throwing or running, he's going to be a dual threat. I mean, I didn't watch any of the game. I'm just looking at the stats, and it doesn't look like he didn't play great. He was 19 of 30 for 233 with one touchdown, but sacked 3 times. But he rushed 11 and for 68 yards. And then you had Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who ran for 10 attempts for 82 yards. And then Eckler for 26, Nichols for 25, Debo for 19. So, I mean, they put up a heck of a rushing game there. And you wonder how much of it is the Giants not being good or the Commanders being good. And I don't know. Doesn't look like the Giants were playing very well, having only scored 6 points. But, their defense did get after them a little bit. They had some successes there. So I really think that with what the Commanders can throw out there on offense, it's going to be a real test for the Packers defense. When you've got to cover guys like Debo, Scary Terry, what's the other one that I'm blanking off of? And then you got Old Man Ertz and guys like that that can change the game quickly. It's going to be interesting to see how Hafley can game this quick.
Yeah, it's Eckler seems kind of questionable going into this game. Krosky-Merritt had a really efficient day, but when you look at it, he had the 10 rushes for 82 yards, but 42 of them came on one play. So it does kind of bring into like, it does sort of reframe that production as like, okay, like, he only was at just over 4 yards on the other rushes, but like you said, it's going to be on this defense to be as disciplined as they can be. They did a lot of really good things from a gap discipline standpoint against Detroit, rallying to the football. And this is the one area where I do concern a little bit with the time of possession discrepancy between week 1 and week 2. Just because you don't have the full week in between to like rest up from that game. And I know it was like bigger in the first half, but it was still like an 11 plus minute discrepancy when you look at the end of the game. So I do wonder if they, like one of the ones that surprised the both of us is like Warren Brinson wasn't active for the game. Does he get called up, especially with Cox out, or do they just activate Sorrell? Do they kind of look at their offense? I didn't get to finish it, but I was going through their offensive personnel. It was a heavy rotation at wide receiver on offense. LaFleur has always said that he likes to get all his guys on the field. Really, the guy with the lowest number of snaps was Savion with his one offensive snap when the game mattered was the little push pass that he got on the opening drive. Otherwise, he didn't get back in the game until the final bleed out the clock drive where he was on the field for the last 2 offensive snaps of the game. But I do
That could have
wonder,
been just because he's been dealing with the injury
right?
all. That could have
Yeah.
just been testing that out.
So I am curious if they look at that, and I do think Savion is the top kick returner, especially with Hobbs' injury concern. I don't think they want Nixon back there until Hobbs is fully back and fully healthy on the field. And I bring this all up in case, do they, sit one of the receivers, whether if it's Reed, like it's too much within too short of a turnaround, or if they're like, okay, like we rotated so heavily, Golden's fine, so like Malik, you take a rest today, we want to get Brinson up kind of thing and stuff. And I just bring this all up because it seems like they want to rotate heavily at defensive tackle, and seeing how interior defensive linemen played, it was all about their activity and their agility and their leveraging their athleticism to make plays on the interior. And it worked out because Green Bay got out to the early lead, took the 10-zip lead, took the 17-3 lead, and then it was okay that they basically let Detroit bleed the clock for them. But you worry about if Washington takes the ball first and they go on a long time consuming drive, and whether they kick the field goal or a touchdown, score a touchdown, if they go open the game on an 8+ minute drive, it's like, ugh, like, there was a point in Sunday's game where the Packers defense was, for all intents and purposes, on the field for like almost an hour of real time straight. The offense got the interception possession, but that was a 3-and-out. So it's kind of like, like I said, we're just talking about cumulative because it's so early in the season. Guys aren't in full football shape yet. And the quick 5-day turnaround, 4 days off, 2 games in 5 days situation. So it'll be really interesting to see how they play that out. But otherwise, like you said, Washington wasn't super efficient on offense. Um, I do think that Detroit's front was able to kind of take it to them at some points. But I think that Green Bay's second level defenders, so like Quay and Edge, are able to do a lot more to disrupt what that Washington offense wants to do. They'll have to be really on top of their P's and Q's with, Debo Samuel's scoring play was a reverse, just like he did in San Francisco when the 49ers were utilizing him in a bunch of different roles. Jaden likes to break the pocket. And, that's the thing is like, he will, and he's a guy who will look to extend plays to throw. And so you've got to have guys with fresh legs to chase him down. And I think this could be a big game for Quay and Edge in that department, where it's like you got these two tall, rangy linebackers who are elite athletes for their position, and they're going to be tasked with corralling Jaden to keep him in the pocket. So curious to see what the pass rush plan is. Laramie Tunsil is there, and he's healthier this year than he was last year, but he is another year older. And the Packers did have some success kind of physically him when they played him on the Texans last season. So it remains to be seen how that goes. And like I said, Josh Connerly is in his second professional game in 5 days. Brian Burns had his way with him. Kevon Thibodeau had some work on him as well. So expect Parsons to get a bunch of snaps over right tackle, to say the least, in this one. And it'll be kind of interesting to see what happens in this one, because this Washington team hasn't seen the Packers, but they have played Parsons. And I believe he played both the games last year against them. So not that you can solely say like, oh, they know what to do against him, and they didn't handle him very well last season. But granted, those were 2 different offensive tackles, and Parsons was on a different defense. So I do think it'll be really big this is a big game for Lucas and Rashawn to maintain the pocket, collapse the pocket, corral the quarterback. But I do want to see them like work to get to the quarterback and not just like hold their ground, like the playoff game against the Eagles last season, where they hemmed Hurts into the pocket but like didn't get close to him very often. So I know Daniels is a much more slippery and like faster player, but at the same time, like, you can't let him just stand back there, because Scary Terry, the ancient version of Zach Ertz, those are all guys who know how to uncover. And I do kind of expect a similar scheme where Halfley is going to keep the lid on the defense and make Daniels be perfect to get the ball down the field. But the Commanders have more reliable weapons to do so, in my opinion, between Debo, McMillan or McLaurin and Ertz, as opposed to like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Laporta, who had been coming off of a down season. So we'll see how the Packers choose to match up in this game.
For sure. And the defensive side of things, offensive side of things for the Packers and defense, the Commanders. The one thing that I can't remember who brought it up, was it Wes Hodquist, that the Packers are going to be going in as like one of the youngest teams in the NFL.
We are the youngest and they're the oldest, and it's
And
like
the oldest.
it's like more than a 4-year age gap average.
Yeah, they average like 28 point something, and the Packers average like 24 point something. And when you look at this defense, you can kind of tell it, because it's like we've said this last year, where these are like blasts from the past names, Bobby Wagner, Dorrance Armstrong Jr., Von Miller, Eddie Goldman, Javon Kinlaw, Marshawn Lattimore. These guys,
Will Harris. Yep.
Yeah, I would have loved them in their prime. At it, this is like building a Madden team right here. It's going to be interesting to see how young Packers can take on some of these wily vets over there, and whether they can hang or not. So it'll be interesting to see that, and hopefully continue, stack successes, continue to build on what they did, open up maybe the playbook a little bit more. I know it's hard to do on a short week, but let's see a little bit more from Matthew Golden. Let's see a little bit more from, Dobbs and all that stuff, and your tight ends. Maybe this will be the week that Musgraves will actually stay on his feet after he catches a ball.
I was gonna say, and to build off of what you're saying, I do think that this is the week where you're kind of like, you want to see them go to that 12 personnel, because the linebackers you listed, it's what is Luvu? Yeah, so these are a bunch of older guys, basically. Luvu is like the young guy at 28, and then you have like Von Miller and his surgically repaired knee. He just tore his ACL like a couple years ago, kind of thing. And Bobby Wagner is more named than he is player at this point. Like, he hasn't been that guy since when he first left Seattle, because I think he left Seattle, went to the Rams, went back to Seattle, and now he's on the Commanders. And it's like like Seattle was kind of like, okay, like, go chase the money kind of thing, and wasn't like super like sore about him going in the division, because they were like, yeah, we kind of know the writing's on the wall, and they brought him back last season because it was like, okay, they were really short linebackers, and for the vibes, we'll bring him back and stuff. And so really want to see Kraft, Musgrave, like you said, and those guys work the middle of the field, because I do think that they had success getting behind like a Jack Campbell and Anzalone, who are more athletic guys than any of these guys are at their stages of their career. And if they had success, out athleting those Lions linebackers, you expect and hope to see the same going into this Commanders game. And the good thing is that, like you said, it's a veteran defensive front, but none of these guys are pass rushers. They are historically better run defenders than they are pass rushers. Like, Wise had some solid years as a pass rusher in New England, but let's see. He's 31 already. His best sack season was 7.5 back in 2022. So, it's been a bit. And then Armstrong's best years with the Cowboys, he was always like a third fiddle, and he had 8.5 a couple years ago. But that was as like a third. He was playing like he was the pecking order that like Lucas was behind Parsons kind of thing. So it's like, you know, there is no Parsons to lead this pass rush kind of thing. You know, Vaughn's not that guy anymore and stuff. So the expectation that I have going to this game is that Green Bay should be able to, even with a potentially hammed due to the Tom injuries and stuff, they should be able to pass protect well enough to make moves in the pass game. Like, I don't expect that if Tom misses the game, they'll have immense issues protecting Love, because these just aren't guys that are going to win instantly off the edge. These are guys that are more power or technician rushers. So, especially if they're able to get the ground game going, you know, and the guy you got to block there is Damon Payne. You know, he's still a good active interior run defender. If they're able to control him on the ground, they should be able to get some movement up front. These Thursday night games, 2 games in 5 nights, you want to get up early, if get up early by a couple scores if you can, and then just shorten the game as fast as possible. And that's honestly what LaFleur has always tried to do. I know that one of the things that we brought up in our season outlook episode is, can he really adhere to his own all gas no brakes, you know, mantra? But this is one of those games where it's like, if you can get a 10-point lead at any point in this game, just squeeze the clock out on this one, because the literal only way you can, like I said, you would love to go 2-0 on the season, 2-0 in the conference, 1-0 in the division, really establish yourself. But the only way you can truly lose this game is if you just get depleted by injuries, due soft tissue injuries due to fatigue and lack of proper conditioning, all that kind of stuff. So you've really just got to manage this game properly and be really smart about how you handle the situation here. Obviously, yeah, and I'm not saying like if you have a chance to pick one or the other, you're gonna pick to try and win the game, but like that LaFleur is not gonna shy away from just taking the air out of the ball if he gets up, even if he's only up a touchdown late in the game. He may just be like, let's just, you know, run it a few times and see what happens kind of thing. And I do think that this is a game where they should be able to get Jacobs going a little better than against the Lions.
And hopefully rotate in a bunch, 3 different running backs just to add that little flair to it, that they're not expecting continuously to push Jacobs. You want to throw in Wilson with his speed and Brooks with his pile driving or bulldozing or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I mean, this should be a good game. I got to thinking about this tonight, that it used to be when my old work schedule is I had Thursdays and Fridays off. So Thursdays were the games that I could watch. Well, now I work on Thursdays and I have the weekends off. So I have to find a way to watch the game at work, because they have video on Amazon blocked on our computers. So yeah, I can't watch watch it on Prime, so I have to figure a way around it. But yeah, I mean, it's never ideal to play this short a week. I was also just thinking, they should have, instead of making it the Thursday night game, make it like the Friday night game. That way you just had
Yeah.
that one extra day. I understand a little bit why they didn't, just because of the whole high school football is usually played on the Friday nights and whatever. But if college is starting to move to Friday night games, I don't see why the pros couldn't either. But it is what it is. That's what they want to do. They think it's a moneymaker, whatever. But this is a good matchup. I don't know how the stands are going to be, because this is a gold package game and it's on a Thursday night. So who's going to travel from Milwaukee, Green Bay for a Thursday night game? It, it's really interesting for that, because it's a gold package game on Thursday night, and they're wearing their
Whiteout. Yeah.
whiteout uniforms. So there's 3 things right there going against the Packers, because it just that's a weird combination for them. But yeah, I mean, I think we've covered it pretty good.
Yeah. And like I said, this is I know we get caught saying this often, but this is such a meat and potatoes game where it's just like control the line of scrimmage and just win this game in the trenches. You know, it'd be cool if we get the fireworks and Love just is on fire like he was on Sunday, and you just get that's how you get off to that explosive start. But I would really like to be able to get Jacobs at the ground game going on Thursday, just to, like I said, I have no problems winning this game boring, because boring usually means healthier, because you've got less bodies flying around. Yeah, like I know I earlier said that Banks got hurt on run blocking on a play, but those are usually farther and fewer between and stuff. And yeah, like, just like I said, take the air out of the ball and just continue to do what you did to Detroit, which was, not as bad as Detroit used to do to us, but they got up early with some explosive plays, and then just in the second half were able to get the run game going. It was a relatively modest 78 yards overall, but you know, Jacobs was averaging like 2.1 yards per rush in the first half, and he ended the game at 3.5. And that was when Detroit knew we wanted to run the ball. So it's like you had a little more success after halftime, and let's just try to get it going a little earlier so that we can get on out of here with a win, kind of thing.
Like you keep pointing out, though, they were also losing the time of possession game. So they weren't having extended drives and stuff like that. It was like short, sweet drives, and then, turn the ball, whether it's a score or a punt or whatever. And so they definitely have to control the time of possession this game.
Right.
And
Because even on the longest drive by plays, the 12 play opening touchdown drive, it only took 5.5 minutes. And I know that generally is a lot of time, but Detroit's first field goal drive, or yeah, their first field goal drive was the 1678-yard 9.5 minute drive. So like, it's four more plays, but they took 4 more minutes to score a field goal, kind of thing. So yeah, those are the kind of ones where if you can do that, score a touchdown, and that's a good way to take Daniels out of the game too. Is like, especially if, what's it called? If the Commanders kick the ball off and you go on one of those like 10-minute drives, it's like, oh, he hasn't warmed up in like a long time, kind of thing. He's just been sitting there with the ball cap on. So, but yeah, who you got? I know we kind of did it for season prediction, but between then and now, how are you feeling about this game?
I still think it's going to be a slugfest. I know I flip flopped back and forth during our season predictions that they were either going to lose Detroit and win Washington, or win Detroit and lose Washington. I still think it's going to be a bit of a slugfest, but with what the Packers went out and did against Detroit, I think they have a better shot at winning it. But I can also see this being a game where, everything goes wrong and the Packers just can't get anything going.
The shuffled O line does fall apart and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah,
Or
yeah,
the ticky tacky injuries start, like Golden, they're saying, is having, it's an ankle, but he shouldn't have any issues. Okay, well, all of a sudden after the first quarter, he's having an issue with it. Or Whelan is having an issue with his knee because of whatever, or, just using an example. I'm not saying it's
yep.
anything, but I could see something like that happening because of the short week, but I feel a little bit more comfortable saying the Packers could pull the win out. I don't want to fully go out and say it's going to be a guaranteed victory, just because I do think it's going to be a hard fought battle.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, if Tom and Banks had made it out of the game with no injury, I would be a little more adamant that they might win by even 10 points, kind of thing. But I think short week, the just the unpredictability of how these games play, these Thursday night games are always a little weird just by nature, because of the short turnaround, especially this one, like I said, that's so early in the season. Guys aren't in full proper conditioning. like Parsons doesn't know where to warm up. Like that was a funny little thing that he was talking about in his locker after the game, where it's like, I run out on the field and the offensive line coach is looking at me like, what the hell are you doing here? Like, you're over there. And he's like, well, with the Cowboys, this is where we warmed up. And they're like, you're not on the Cowboys anymore, go over there and stuff. So
Well, and he doesn't know the full celebrations either, because that was the
yeah,
funny video.
yeah. He's looking at them like, is that a fadeaway basketball shot? And I love that the other defensive linemen were like, yeah, do it. And he's like, kind of like, he's like, am I doing it right? It it humanizes him. It just shows that these guys are humans. There is, like, it does give credence to the whole, yeah, these are people too, and they do live, they put their pants on one leg at a time like the rest of us.
I do have to wonder how Butkus and him get along, being that they went to two Big Ten schools. And the reason I say this is because, was it 2019 when I went up there for training camp? I always wear my Hawkeye hat. And he was walking to go to practice and said, "Hey, Coach Butkus, how's it going?" And he goes, "You're wearing the wrong hat." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Well, in practice, he coaches against a bunch of Big Ten guys. So I see that we're a little more organized this time, and we have Joe has done well to write our over and unders out. And so far on the season, Joe is running away with the over unders. I know it's 1 week, but he is up 1, 2, 3, 5-3, 5-2. So, Joe, take us through what you got this week.
So I think a lot of these are going to end up being the same over the season, just because of how the Packers play. I'm tempted to change this one just
I
by it.
realized, I was just looking at it now. I was like, wait a minute.
But over under Micah Parsons half a sack.
I think he's gonna get one. You can go to yours. I just want to look something up real quick.
I think he's going to end up getting it because I guess he was lobbying for more snaps than what they were wanting to give him week one. So, and with him having a little bit of knowledge against the Commanders, and even having a little bit of knowledge of Dan Quinn team, there's a good possibility that he can come away with some. He knows some things. Not saying he knows the complete playbook of the offense runs or whatever, but he's going to know a little bit more than what the Packers do overall. So I can see him coming. I originally had it set at 1, just because there was a chance he'd pull like a Rashawn Gary and get the 1.5 or whatever. But I think a lot of it's going to depend on, again, the snap counts he gets. Is he going to get up to 30 again, or is he going to be, are they going to limit him down to 20, especially if Cox doesn't play? They're not going to want to risk having another one of their rushers go down. So, yeah, I think I'm going to go over. I think I am going to say he's going to hit that 1.5 mark. But since I set it at a 0.5, I think he'll go over that.
So, just for reference, he had 4.5 sacks against the Commanders last year. Granted, like I said, those were two different offensive tackles, but signify that he has played against Daniel, so he kind of has calibrated him in terms of, he knows what to expect from an athleticism standpoint. I don't know how many snaps he played against Tunsil last year, but that was his second game back from injury, and he didn't record anything against. He didn't have a sack that game, so he obviously didn't get one against Tunsil last year. But yeah, we'll see how.
But does it say anything about his pressures or anything like that?
No, I'm just on Pro Football Reference, so yeah, no, I don't have the pressure counts or anything like that. Just going off the quote unquote traditional counting stats, because I was like, I remembered he had something like 4 sacks against them last year. So, I agree. I'm going to go with the over as well. I think that, and I agree. I think he may end up with 2.
So my next one, I got Jordan Love 1.5 touchdowns. Now this can be total. No, we'll go with just passing. We'll go passing. I'm going to take the under on it because I have a feeling that they're going to try to rely on the run game a little bit more.
Extend Jacob's record.
Well, not just extend his record, but try to extend drives a little bit more to take up more time. I think there's going to be some goofy plays too, like maybe a jet sweep or something thrown in there. Although I like the initiative, maybe not a Tucker Craft end around. I thought it was good, but I thought it was called at a weird time, that it just was a weird setup. So if you're going to do it a little bit different than you did against Detroit. But I have a feeling you're going to see some of those just because, again, they're going to want to extend drives. So yeah, I'm going to go under, but it's going to be like he's going to be like right at the 1 touchdown. And he could, since I said it as passing, he could also have a rushing one too. But yeah,
I'm going over on this one. I just think that while I agree with you, and I've said that they want to get the rushing game going, I do think that whether he has I think he's going to have a decently long touchdown throw this game. But I also think that he's going to have like a goal line touchdown as well. So and I have getting 3 total. So we'll see.
and of course, this leads right into Josh Jacobs over under 50.5 yards. He hit 66 against Detroit, which again was better than the whole Detroit team had. So I'm going to say over. I think he'll at least hit the 75-yard mark. I know. Oh, I think I got it right here. I'm pretty sure that the Commanders held up pretty good against the run game against the Giants, but this isn't the Giants that they're going to be playing. So I'm thinking that they're possibly going to. Tyrone Tracy only had 24 yards. Singletary had 9 and Russ had 44. I'm thinking that they may, with the way Jordan Love was slinging it, they may try to concentrate a little bit more on defending the pass than the run, and that'll open up things a little bit more. So yeah, I'm going to go over and he hits 75.
Same thing, and I'm going a little further. I think he's gonna touch 100 this week. I just think that kind of like last year in week 2, obviously for very different circumstances, but I think LaFleur is gonna try and get that run game unlocked. And I did say on Twitter that some people are like, oh, they couldn't run the ball, run blocking, blah. But no, that was a function of the fact that Detroit was like, we're not letting Jacob start rolling, like he did in that game in December last year where he 3 touchdowns. We're gonna see if Love can beat us, and he did. And I know that on paper, Washington has better corners, but Marshawn Lattimore is as injury prone recently as
They've got young
Jair has been.
corners.
Yeah, and then Amos is a rookie, and Saint Ristol is a second-year player. So, yep.
So my next one, I have total for the defense over under 2.5 sacks. I'll let you take this one first.
I've got over. I think they're going to get to like 4 or 5 because just how Daniels plays. He's a play extender type, and he had. I think they said that he was sacked 47 times last year, but I think they said like he was sacked for an average of like 2 yards a sack or something like that, and it was because he like almost set a league record they don't really keep track of this, but it felt like he must have set a record for the most like 0-yard sacks, which is like drives offensive line coaches insane. But
He's
it's
how
like,
they used to talk about Fran Tarkington. He'd run a mile just to get a yard.
yeah, exactly. So I think that they're going to have a bunch. I don't know if they're necessarily going to be like massive yard losses, but I do think they're going to get a bunch of them.
with the way that they can run the ball, I don't think the opportunities are going to exactly be there to gain a ton of sacks. I probably should have set the number at 3.5 because I think they're going to end up with like 3 total. Um, so I'm going to take the over, but it's going to be a slight over.
All right.
And then
Capping
my
off,
last one, just kind of throw in there, was Matthew Golden over under 20.5 yards.
I'm going to go aggressive. I think not that this is going to be his breakout game, but I think he's going to have some opportunities on Sunday. They were running a lot of switch routes, a lot of what's it called, stacked formations and things like that, and he was getting open almost at will for the better portion of the game. Obviously, on paper, Lattimore, even Amos and Sane were still they're better corners than what the Lions put out there. But I think that he might have one of the big gainers.
Did Texas play Old Miss last year?
I think they did. Hold on.
Because Amos is Old Miss and Golden beat Texas. So
Oh.
it's possible Amos knows a little bit about Golden's game. Not saying it's going to help him a ton. I'm saying that it might give a little bit for him, but I'm going to go over. I'm still hoping that the first play of the game is going to be the bomb deep to Golden just to set the tone on things. But I'm wondering how much the ankle is going to affect anything.
Yeah, I think over just because I think they're. I still think they're going to spread the ball around. I do think that for most of the season they want to operate in this type of ball distribution where it's like no one has more than 5 targets. They're gonna try and get the ball to like 7 guys minimum per week, kind of thing. And like I said, LaFleur has always stated that he likes to rotate his guys, rotate his receivers, and Golden was the second boundary to either Dobbs or Wicks, or he was like the primary boundary receiver when he was on the field. And he started the game with Dobbs as the 2 receivers in 12 personnel. He was getting a lot of, it wasn't like he was only out there on 11 personnel or anything like that. He was getting a lot of like the 12 and 21 personnel snaps out there. So really good sign for him going forward. And yeah, I think that, and I think it's not going to just be like slightly over. I think he might hit like 50, 60 yards this game.
Yeah, that's all the ones I got.
Sounds good.
Uh,
Anything for your favorite segment this week,
I
or
do,
nothing?
but I think we should talk about the Christian Watson
Got it.
extension real quick since that's new news. So I was trying to pull up the numbers real quick. It's what, 13.6 million or something like that.
Yeah, and
Um,
to
so it's a
think about
1-year extension.
the way to think about this is or 13 and a quarter.
Okay.
And so the way to look at this is the team is really pleased with how he's attacked his rehab. I think this gives credence to the reports that he is coming back sooner than expected. And this is a way to, he'll be back, but it'll also like this extension takes them through the like the mythic 18 months post ACL repair window. And because 18 months is basically the start of the 2026 season, and so that way you get to fully gauge like, okay, he's back this season, but is he still slightly compromised, not fully healthy? You and playing the long game here, what was the report in 2022 when LaFleur drafted Watson, or not LaFleur, when Gutekunst drafted Watson? He was trying like heck to trade back into the first round to take Watson to
And
get
that's
that
what I've
50
been calling it. This is
right.
basically just exercising a 5th-year option.
Right, exactly. And the 2 benefits is one, the 2022 5th-year option for a receiver is like in the 15 and a half range. So couple $1 million savings there. And Green Bay's, they're not pinching pennies, but every little bit helps at this point. And 2, that deal is not fully guaranteed like the 5th-year option would be. So I look at this more as similar to what they did with what's his face with Love. Like you remember, it was like, oh,
Yeah.
are they going to exercise his 5th year option? Blah blah blah. And with Love, they paid him a little more, but it was not fully guaranteed like the 5th year option would be and stuff. And so I think that I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a void year attached to this thing. That if everything goes well, they're going to start negotiating this offseason, and that void year won't even matter because it'll just get reabsorbed into like a re-extension off of this thing and stuff. So
Who was it that said, somebody put it well, that this also takes the pressure off Watson from pushing it too hard
yes,
to try
yes,
getting a new contract for the next year.
right.
So,
Because
yeah, it's a good deal.
yeah, it is good for both sides. Because yeah, everyone's like, oh, this is really good for the Packers, but you're absolutely right that this is really good for this is really really good for Watson too. Because you're absolutely right that he's from his mind, he's like, I've got to get back as early this season as I possibly can because I don't want to sign a lame duck 1 year deal with anybody kind of thing where, this is kind of a best case for him because he's been in this system his whole career. He gets to play one more full season in it no matter what. And like, he won't have to be rushing back from rehab, have a bad return for, to the field this year. And then like, no one wants to give him like a full on contract. And so it's like, I got to sign a 1 year deal and then I got to learn a new playbook, get used to a new quarterback, all that kind of stuff. So be in a system that he's comfortable and familiar with, play with guys that he knows how he plays off of, and unfortunately, this likely signals that the team is kind of picking him over Dobbs, and and I see in a lot of people that are like it's final, but the way I say it is not necessarily because I'm not rooting against or like I'm not trying to like steer it one way, but like if Watson just can't get back to the guy he was before, it's like, well, they may keep Dobbs longer kind of thing and stuff. And even if Watson looks good, if Wicks and or Reed, but especially if both of them falter like they did last year, it's like Dobbs is the one. And like I said, the one thing that Dobbs will always have in his back pocket is he is the guy that Love trusts the most. Like, he's not the most dynamic, he's not the most athletic, he's not the most explosive, all that stuff, but he is the guy that when like you saw it on that third down play right before they kicked the field goal, that it's like he could have waited a second more for Kraft, or like he could have checked the play side combination, but it was like, nah, I'm gonna just put my best throw I can on Dobbs and live with the results kind of thing and stuff. And it's those kind of moments that I know some people are like, oh, you're overblowing it, you're overrating it, but I'm like, no, like that's truly how players look at it. And when you look at any sort of similar situation, go back to like the fourth down play against Kansas City a couple years ago. You have like sort of the 2 touchdowns he caught against Seattle last year and stuff like that. Like, he is the guy that Dobbs is the one that when it's a play breakdown or things like that, it's Dobbs that he turns to. So it'll give him every little chance, but for upside's sake, they do want Watson to pan out and be healthy. And obviously, if Golden runs away with the wide receiver one job like I expect him to, they're just gonna be like, we've got Golden, Watson's on the mend, we've got to extend Kraft. And like I put it on Derailed, like I do think I'm the biggest Dobbs fan in this fan base. I wanted the Packers to draft him from 2020, like when I was watching him at Nevada in 2020. That said, the way the team is laid out now, the way I look at it is it's Quay or it's Dobbs. And I'm taking Quay because the way he's looked, not just on Sunday, but also from that stretch on the back half of last season before he boloed his ankle, pairing him with Cooper has the potential to be special in this defense. Especially they can handcuff Halfley to a standpipe in Lambeau and never let him leave. But I do think that, and we've heard Groot has said like his intent is to extend Quay. I know that we're getting far off of like just Watson's extension, but just taking like we've talked about what it means for Watson and the team, but also taking a little bit of a higher altitude look at what this means for the rest of the roster and what decisions might be for
And
going
I think
forward.
this all, there's all kinds of things that happen. Knock on wood, hopefully Watson doesn't have any kind of setback, or God forbid you know, re-injure it. But this is just kind of insurance. That way, if something happens during the season, let's say Wicks goes out and tanks the rest of the season or injures something and is going to be gone, maybe they can work something with Dobbs. Maybe they can work something with this. And this is the one drawback of the Micah Parsons trade. Now you don't have that first rounder to spend on another first round wide receiver if that would have been your plan. Nothing against it. I'm just saying that you've got to look at your wide receiver room and say, who are we keeping? Who can we afford to keep? And who's worth getting rid of? I know there's rumors going around right now that there are teams offering stuff to Green Bay for Dobbs. I'm not sure I would want to take anything off of it. And there's also the possibility of the tag next year.
Yeah. And the other way I look at the absolute galaxy brain of it is maybe it's Dobbs, maybe it's Wicks, maybe Reed, probably least likely because we don't know what the hell is up with his foot, or even Musgrave. Some team might be like, there's so much talent there. That might be your one of those four, may be your avenue to getting a cornerback. Like especially depending on how the Browns look right before the deadline, and if you can get Watson back a couple weeks before he's supposedly trending, then it's like, do we feel so good about the depth in that room that we can trade one of those guys to the Browns for, say, a Greg Newsome kind of thing, and like shore up the cornerback room that way? So,
Or
like,
maybe that's your way of getting a first rounder back. I mean,
right,
if a team comes and offers me a first rounder for Romeo Dobbs, I'm pulling the trigger tomorrow.
yeah,
And he's totally worth it. I mean, like you said, he's been a guy that is consistent, is athletic. And I even said it on our review of the game. He looks sharper in his route running.
yeah.
So, but anyway, we're getting a little bit long. I'm going to play this clip here. It's about a minute long clip. And I really didn't have anything for this segment until I started watching TikTok. And I can't think of what's their podcast called. It's with Taylor Lewan and Compton.
Oh, Bussin' with the Boys or something
Yeah,
like that.
that's it. They had Indomitian Sue on, and they brought up the stomp of Aaron Rodgers. So I'm going to play the clip.
Did have a couple situations when you were in Detroit.
Yeah.
With
Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, Aaron
Stepping
Rodgers.
backwards.
Yeah, that to me is complete BS, because if you go back and watch the play, I'm tussling like 2 or 3
Pull it
offensive
up.
linemen, and I'm getting pushed back. I don't have eyes in the back of my head to see what he's going on and what he's doing. I'm not looking at where he's at. I just got done figuring out fighting 2 and 3 of you dudes.
Hey,
You did, but look at you, like you are in full.
Now, the rest of that clip is actually Lewan and them are busting his balls on that, because it's like, and they said it's like you stepped on a kid's toy and you just stepped on it again. And that's the point. You weren't fighting anybody. The play was over. You were backing up. You could tell how he felt initially Rodgers' leg by just brushing it. And then he went full on and stepped on it and held there. So I love the revisionist history in his mind of, it was the heat of the moment type thing. And whatever, man. You're a dirty player. You were always a dirty player. Going back to college, get over yourself, admit your mistake. Don't blame anybody else but yourself. It's your own fucking fault.
Like, Evan Dietrich Smith would like to argue that, yeah, it wasn't just a one-timer and an accident kind of thing, because he too is had I can't remember if he got stomped on too, but there was another. It's like
No,
he was,
wasn't Dietrich? He like slammed his head into the ground,
yeah, or
and
something
then
like that.
TJ Lang got kicked in the nuts,
Yeah,
and so it's like you did this shit on
it was
purpose.
like 3 or 4 incidents over a 2-3 year period kind of thing, because it was like it started when Detroit thought they were good in 2011, and there was the big Thanksgiving game where the Packers were undefeated and they were like something and 1 or something and 2 going into that game, and yeah, that was the first time he lost his mind and stuff, and then it went all the way through I think the 2013 or 14 game. But yeah, you're right, like it was one of those where it's like, no, like I do appreciate that Compton and Luan were like, bro, like look at you, you're looking at
Well,
it.
here, I'll finish the clip. This is what they said.
Like you are in full control of your body.
Full control.
You
And-
feel like
and show-
like the living room or something. And you might step on one of your kids' toys. You feel it, and you like stop and turn around. You felt it, and then when another one and kind of stood there and checked, did he catch it?
Yeah, hey, that's so real. You let that foot sit there for a minute.
Hey,
you let that
like,
foot sit there for a
he's
believe
minute.
what
not
you
even
want to believe at the
denying
end of the
it,
day,
like,
and I'm not going to sit here. I got fined for it, rightfully so or not. Those things happen. Like there's times where people are really intentional. Like we've seen some stuff, some clips of some guys where they're actually like trying to hurt people.
Yeah, like, did have a couple.
Yeah, so he's not taking
He doesn't
account
hard
for.
Yeah, he doesn't take account for it, and he doesn't hard, and you know that he knows, because he doesn't hard deny it when Luan and Compton are like doing the like kid toy reference and stuff.
Right, and they were playing the clip at the time. So they
Right.
had it up on the screen while they were talking about it. And they were joking about it, but in all seriousness, that was him. That was how he played. Like I said, it even went, I remember when he was coming out of college, they were talking about some of the shit that he would do and him having a temper and stuff like that. So the first little nick on Rodgers, fully understand, accident. The second one was not an accident.
Yep.
So shut the fuck up.
And on that note, we will put a bow on this episode of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. We thank you for joining us tonight. Please check out the website, ohanapackers.org. Articles are going up. All the episodes from this pod are up there. Cheese Talk Radio are up there. Please check out our merch. Support the channel that way. Check out our social media at Ohana_Packers, at Ohana Packers Edition on Instagram. Please follow us on Facebook. We are trying to hit 100 followers so that we can do live streams through Facebook. That's the big one we're trying to do. So, whether we do spot things for like something like this Watson extension, or if it's a big win or prep for a big game, like some kind of injury update, like, oh, all of a sudden it's like Watson's off pup kind of thing and stuff. We may go live. We want to go live for that. So we want to be able to reach you guys wherever on all the social medias.
Maybe we can talk Kawano doing into doing a film breakdown like Dusty Evely does. And
Please follow the podcast on your favorite podcasting apps. Give us a like and a subscribe. And Joe, let's get to week 2. Packers lead it off against the Commanders, looking to go 2-0 and be the first team in the conference to get to 2 wins. And it would be a pretty momentous thing after they started off 0-2 in the conference, 0-3 really in the conference last year. So this would be a really big one because they lost to They lost to.
I don't even remember.
No, they started off 1-3 in the conference because they lost to the Eagles, lost to the Vikings, beat the Cardinals, and then lost to the Lions. And they were beating a bunch of AFC teams in between that. So this would be a really big turnaround for the Packers, really important for their playoff seeding, playoff chances. And with that, go Pack, go.